The rain fell like bullets over Jongno that night, hammering against the rusted fire escapes and cracked windows of the Gosiwon district. In the maze of cramped rooms where Seoul's forgotten lives stacked like sardines, most people learned to sleep through anything: police sirens, drunken fights, the occasional scream that everyone pretended not to hear. Oluchi Amadi was not most people. She woke to the sound of her door splintering. Not knocking, not rattling, splintering. The cheap wood giving way like paper under the force of something heavy crashing through. Her heart seized in her chest as she sat up in the narrow bed, her unseeing eyes wide open in the darkness that had been her constant companion since birth. 24 years of blindness had taught her to read the world through sound, smell, and texture, and right now, every sense screamed danger, heavy breathing, labored, wet. The metallic tang of blood, so much blood she could taste it on her tongue, and underneath it all, something else. Expensive cologne, the kind that cost more than 3 months of her rent, now corrupted by the iron stench of violence. "Who's there?" Her voice came out stronger than she felt, her fingers gripping the thin blanket like a shield. "I'm calling the police." But he didn't need to know that. The intruder collapsed. She heard it, the sickening thud of a body hitting her floor, the grunt of pain that escaped through clenched teeth, and then something that made her blood run cold. The sound of a gun skittering across the linoleum, coming to rest somewhere near her feet. Every survival instinct told her to scream, to run, to do anything but what she did next. Oluchi Amadi got out of bed and moved toward the bleeding stranger. Shin Dohyun had killed 47 people. He knew the exact number because Chairman Yoon made him count, made him remember every face, every name, every last breath. "A weapon must know its purpose," the old man liked to say. "And you, Dohyun, are my finest weapon." The man who never failed, never hesitated, never felt. Until tonight. The mission had been simple. Eliminate Park Jong-soo, a rival clan leader who'd been skimming profits. Dohyun had done it clean. 2 shots, center mass, just like always. But Park's men had been waiting. Ambush. 6 against 1. 6 was nothing. Dohyun had faced worse odds and walked away without a scratch, but one of them had gotten lucky. A wild shot that caught him in the side just as he was finishing the last man. The bullet had torn through muscle and maybe something important, because he was losing blood faster than he could afford. He'd meant to find an empty building, somewhere to patch himself up and wait for extraction. Instead, he'd stumbled into this Gosiwon, the cheapest, most invisible kind of housing in Seoul, and crashed through the first unlocked door he found. Wrong door. Through the haze of blood loss, he registered the girl. Small. Dark skin that gleamed like polished ebony in the faint light from the window. Natural hair wrapped in a colorful cloth that seemed absurdly vibrant against the gray misery of the room. And eyes. Large, beautiful eyes that looked directly at him but somehow past him at the same time. Blind. She was blind. "Don't move." Her voice carried an accent he couldn't place. African, maybe. She was feeling her way toward him, hands outstretched, movements careful but not afraid. "You're hurt. I can smell the blood." Her touch was light, clinical, but something about it made his skin burn. "Where is the wound?" "No one can know I'm here. I can try to stop the bleeding with what I have, but I need proper bandages, antiseptic. Maybe antibiotics if I can convince the pharmacist." "And you think you're the one giving orders?" But the blood loss was making him stupid, and her hands were warm against his cold skin, and she was humming something soft under her breath, a melody that tugged at memories he'd buried so deep they might as well be dead. "Dohyun," he heard himself say. Shin Dohyun. "Your parents had high hopes." Used the last of her bottled water to clean the wound. Found some kind of herbal paste in a small tin. "My mother's recipe," she explained, "brought from Lagos, and applied it with fingers that knew exactly what they were doing, despite never seeing the damage. And through it all, she sang. It was quiet, almost unconscious, a lullaby in a language he didn't recognize. Igbo, he would later learn. The song her mother had sung to her in the womb, before dying in childbirth, before Oluchi's father had looked at his blind daughter and decided she wasn't worth loving. Dohyun didn't know any of that yet. He just knew that the melody reached into his chest and squeezed something that had been numb for 28 years. His mother had sung to him once. Before she'd sold him to the men who turned him into this, he'd forgotten the song, forgotten her face, forgotten everything except the hollow place where love should have been. But this woman's voice filled that hollow place like water into a cracked vessel. "You should sleep," Oluchi said, her song fading into silence. "I've done what I can. The bleeding has slowed. If you survive the night, you might actually live. You don't know what I am. But you also said, 'Thank you,' when I gave you water," she continued. "You tried to warn me away. And your heartbeat hasn't changed once during this entire conversation, which means you're either in shock or you're telling the truth. And in the morning, you're going to explain why the most dangerous man I've ever met chose my door to fall through. Your voice is just lonely." He fell asleep to the sound of a blind woman humming a lullaby in a language he didn't understand, her hand resting lightly on his arm as if to make sure he was still breathing. And something inside him, something that had been dead for 28 years, began, impossibly, to wake up. He woke to violence. The door, what remained of it, exploded inward. 3 men, armed, professional. They'd tracked his blood trail from the mission site, just like he'd known they would. "Target acquired," one of them said into a radio. "And there's a witness." Then silence. Heavy, absolute silence broken only by the rain outside and Dohyun's ragged breathing. "Are you hurt?" His voice was different now. Colder. The voice of the weapon Chairman Yoon had created. "No." Her own voice surprised her. Steady, calm. "Are you?" When he finally stopped in front of her, she could feel the heat of him, smell the fresh blood layered over the old. "You need to come with me," he said. "They'll send more. They always send more." "You saved my life," he said finally. "I don't know why. I don't know how to respond to that. But I know that if you stay here, you'll be dead by morning." Oluchi reached out, her fingers finding his blood-soaked shirt, feeling the new wounds layered over the old. He was shaking, she realized, not from cold or blood loss or fear, but from something else entirely, something she suspected he didn't have a name for. "Who are you?" she asked. "Really? I don't have a family, a home, or a reason to exist beyond following orders." His hand closed over hers, rough, calloused, trembling. "But you sang to me tonight, and for the first time in my entire life I wanted to wake up tomorrow." "Okay," she whispered. "I'll go with you." The Reaper led the blind girl out into the rain-soaked night. Neither of them knew that everything was about to change. 7 days. Oluchi had exactly 7 days before her student visa expired, and she became just another illegal immigrant in a country that didn't want her. 7 days before everything she'd worked for, the nursing degree, the chance at a real life, the desperate hope that she could be more than the blind girl her father had thrown away, vanished like smoke. She'd been counting those days obsessively for weeks, planning, strategizing, trying to figure out how to stretch her last W50,000 until she could find a solution. Now she stood in the middle of a penthouse that probably cost more than her entire village in Lagos, listening to a killer explain why she could never go home. "The men who came to your room were from the Cheongryongpa," Dohyun said. His voice had returned to that cold, mechanical tone, the voice of the weapon, not the man who'd trembled when she sang to him. "They're a rival clan. They'll have your photograph from the building's security cameras by now. Your name, your address, everything." "I'm blind." "So, what do you propose?" Her voice was calm, clinical, the voice she used when dealing with difficult patients at the free clinic where she'd been volunteering. "You brought me here for a reason. What is it?" "How do you know that?" "And in 7 days you'll be deported back to a country where you have nothing and no one. I'm offering you a solution. The Cheongryongpa can't touch you without starting a war they can't win, because you'll be under my protection, officially. Real medical care, not a back alley surgeon who might sell my location to the highest bidder. Cold, calculated, and completely devoid of anything resembling human emotion. And yet she could hear the thing he wasn't saying, the desperation underneath the detachment, the fact that Shin Dohyun, the Reaper, the most feared man in Seoul's underworld, was asking her for help because he literally had no one else to ask. If I say no, you'll never see me again, and you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. But Oluchi Amadi had been making impossible choices her entire life. Choosing to keep studying when everyone told her a blind girl couldn't be a nurse. Choosing to leave Lagos when her father made it clear she wasn't welcome. Choosing to survive in a foreign country with no money, no family, and no guarantees. This was just another impossible choice. I have conditions, she said. She felt his surprise, a subtle shift in his breathing, a slight movement backward. Conditions? Something she couldn't quite identify. I would never… He stopped. Started again. I don't want… That's not why I… You let me finish my degree. I don't care what else is happening. I've worked too hard to give up now. Thought about the man standing in front of her, a killer who'd trembled when she sang, who didn't know how to be touched, who was offering her everything she needed in exchange for the one thing she could give. One more thing, she said. You teach me to cook Korean food. Teach me. Then his hand found hers, tentative, almost frightened. Deal, he said. The infection was worse than he'd admitted. 3 days after their wedding, a brief civil ceremony with 2 of Dohyun's men as witnesses, Oluchi found him collapsed on the bathroom floor, burning with fever. Idiot, she muttered, feeling for his forehead and hissing at the heat. You absolute idiot. How long have you been hiding this? That's not worse. That's about to be dead. She was already running through protocols in her head, calculating what she needed, what she could improvise. I need antibiotics, IV fluids, and you need to tell me where your people get medical supplies, because I doubt you have a neighborhood pharmacy you trust. She called the number he provided, barked orders at whoever answered with a confidence she didn't feel, and then spent the next 6 hours fighting to keep Shin Dohyun alive. She cleaned the wound properly this time, using the surgical kit that arrived within the hour, along with enough antibiotics to supply a small hospital. She set up an IV line, her fingers finding veins with the practiced ease of hundreds of hours in the clinic. She monitored his temperature, his breathing, his pulse, waiting for any sign that she was losing him, and she talked. It was something she'd learned in nursing school. Patients did better when they weren't alone, when someone was there, filling the silence, giving them something to hold on to. So she told him about Lagos, about her mother, who'd died giving her life, about her father, who'd looked at his blind daughter and seen only a burden, about the aunt who'd secretly taught her to read Braille, who'd convinced her that she could be something more than what the world expected. She died when I was 16, Oluchi said, her hand resting on Dohyun's chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart. Cancer. By then, I'd already decided to become a nurse, to save people the way no one could save her. But his hand moved, just slightly, to cover hers. It was the first time he'd initiated contact. She kept talking, told him about her fiancé, the man she'd thought she loved, who'd proposed when they were both 20 and she was still foolish enough to believe in fairy tales. He left the day after I got the diagnosis. Permanent, irreversible, blind for life. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. He said he couldn't be with someone who would always need to be taken care of. Like I was a burden. Like I wasn't the one who'd been taking care of him for 3 years. Top of my class, 3 jobs, surviving on nothing but spite and instant ramen. She'd told him to call her that. It was what her aunt used to call her, and somehow it felt right. I'm here. How do you feel? But you stayed. Because you needed saving, she said finally. And because no one had ever needed me before. Not really. Not like that. What was that? He asked. A kiss? On your hand? Is that okay? Then barely audible. Yes. Luchi, I don't know what I am. Oluchi went to classes during the day, accompanied by a bodyguard who pretended to be her assistant. Dohyun was still too weak to leave the apartment, still recovering from the infection that had nearly killed him. So she came home each evening. Home. She was already thinking of it as home. And found him waiting. The cooking lessons were a disaster. That's not how you cut an onion, she said, her hands covering his on the knife. You're going to lose a finger. Creating something instead of destroying. Together. You are not alone. I don't remember her name. But sometimes when I'm between sleeping and waking, I remember a song, a feeling, something warm. Broken. I just showed you they were possible. You chose to learn. Neither of them heard the phone vibrating in the other room. Neither of them knew that Chairman Yoon had just discovered where his weapon was hiding, or that he'd ordered Dohyun to kill the woman who was slowly bringing him back to life. Chairman Yoon was a patient man. He'd built his empire over 40 years, starting with a single gambling den in Busan and expanding until his influence touched every corner of Korean society. Politicians, CEOs, police commissioners, they all answered to him, whether they knew it or not. And at the center of his empire stood his greatest creation, Shin Dohyun, the Reaper. Yoon had found the boy in the slums, a half-starved 6-year-old with dead eyes and a mother desperate enough to sell him. He'd recognized the potential immediately. Some children were born soft. Dohyun had been born empty, a vessel waiting to be filled. 28 years of careful engineering had produced the perfect weapon. Dohyun didn't question, didn't hesitate, didn't feel. He simply executed, with a precision that had made Yoon the most feared man in Asia. Until now. "Show me the footage again," Yoon said, his voice soft, dangerous. The screen flickered to life, displaying security camera footage from a Gosiwon in Jongno. There was Dohyun, wounded and bleeding, crashing through a door. And there was the girl. Dark skin, bright head wrap. Moving through the darkness with the confidence of someone who couldn't see, Yoon watched as she knelt beside his weapon, watched as she cleaned his wounds, sang to him, stayed with him through the night, watched as something impossible happened. Shin Dohyun let himself be touched. "Who is she?" Yoon asked. "Oluchi Amadi, Nigerian national, student visa, expired as of 3 days ago." His assistant's voice was careful, neutral. "However, records show she married Shin Dohyun 2 days ago. The paperwork is legitimate. Somewhere out there, his weapon was playing house with a blind girl from Africa. The betrayal wasn't personal. Yoon didn't believe in personal feelings. It was practical. A weapon that developed attachments was a weapon that could be compromised, leveraged, turned. "Contact our people in Lagos," he said. "Find her family, and send a team to retrieve her. I want her alive. Send him the standard test protocol. Let's see where his loyalties truly lie." Dohyun sat in the darkness for a long moment, listening to Luchi breathe in the bedroom. Soft, peaceful, the kind of sleep that came from trusting the person beside you. Something inside him, something new, something terrifying, screamed at him not to go, to take her and run, to disappear into the vast anonymity of the world where even Yoon's reach couldn't find them. But 28 years of conditioning was stronger than 3 weeks of tenderness. He left a note on the kitchen counter, "Back soon, don't worry," and slipped into the night. The Gangnam facility was a concrete bunker hidden beneath a legitimate shipping company. Dohyun had been here hundreds of times, for briefings and debriefings and the occasional enhanced interrogation that required his specific skills. Tonight, it felt like walking into his own grave. "My Reaper." Yoon stood in the center of the main room, flanked by 4 of his elite guards. "You look different, softer." "That's what you seem to have forgotten. There are no secrets from me. There never have been. She knows where you sleep. And apparently, she knows how to make you forget who you belong to. Kill her and all is forgiven. Refuse and you both die." Somewhere he hadn't known existed until 3 weeks ago. Yoon's expression didn't change. "Excuse me?" "Bring her in." She heard footsteps, multiple sets, approaching from her left, the whisper of expensive fabric. And then, beneath it all, a heartbeat she would recognize anywhere. Dohyun was here. "My dear," a new voice, older, cultured, terrifying in its calm. "You've caused quite a bit of trouble." The Reaper and his blind bride. It would make a wonderful tragedy. And I know that none of it changes how I feel about him, because whatever you've made him into, he's choosing to be something different now. And that choice is stronger than anything you've built. Heard Dohyun's breathing change, from controlled to something else, something wild. "I made my choice 3 weeks ago," Dohyun said. "When I broke through her door instead of dying in an alley, she saved my life. And I am going to spend the rest of mine protecting hers." Shin Dohyun, the Reaper, turned his weapon not on his blind wife, but on the 4 elite guards who'd been positioned to kill her. 4 shots. 4 bodies, 2 seconds. Then he was moving, crossing the space to Luchi, cutting her bonds with a blade that seemed to materialize from nowhere. "Can you run? Just hold on to me and don't let go." She heard everything. Every shot, every scream, every gurgling death rattle, and she didn't let go. They emerged into the night, cold, clear, the lights of Seoul glittering in the distance like false promises. A car was waiting, engine already running. "Get in." Dohyun practically threw her into the back seat, then slid behind the wheel. "Keep your head down." "Away from here." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I should have known he'd come for you. I should have protected you better." "Let them come." Dohyun's voice had shifted, back to cold, back to lethal, the voice of the Reaper, but his hand stayed gentle in hers. "I will destroy anyone who tries to take you from me, even if I have to tear this whole city apart. Not for anyone." He'd made calls during the drive, cashing in favors he'd accumulated over decades, building an alliance of people who hated Chairman Yoon almost as much as he did. The Cheongryong Pa, the Park Syndicate, 3 independent contractors who'd had family members killed by Yoon's orders, all of them ready to move when Dohyun gave the signal. But first, there was something he had to do. "You should sleep." Luchi's voice came from the doorway of the bedroom. She'd found her way there by sound, by touch, already learning the layout of this unfamiliar space. "I can't." He was standing at the window, watching the lights of the port below. "Not yet." A memory I'd buried so deep I thought it was gone. He turned to face her. "She used to sing to me, before she sold me. I don't remember the words, but I remember feeling safe, and I realized that maybe some things can't be destroyed, only buried, before all of it. But for one perfect moment, Shin Dohyun, the Reaper, the weapon, the monster, stood in a safe house in Busan, holding the woman who'd saved his soul and let himself believe that maybe he could be saved after all. Then the moment passed, and they went to war. The safe house in Busan became their fortress. For 3 days, Dohyun coordinated the alliance from the cramped living room, speaking in clipped Korean to men whose names Luchi didn't recognize, but whose voices told her everything she needed to know. Dangerous men. Killers like her husband. But all of them united by a common enemy. Chairman Yoon had made too many enemies over the years. Now those enemies were coming to collect. Luchi spent those 3 days learning the space, counting steps from the bedroom to the kitchen, memorizing the placement of furniture, mapping exits in case she needed to flee. She also spent them thinking, processing, trying to reconcile the man who held her hand so gently with the man who'd killed 14 people in less than 5 minutes. "You're quiet." She was sitting on the narrow balcony, face turned toward the sea she couldn't see but could smell. Salt and brine and the distant promise of freedom. "I'm thinking." "About who?" It took longer than it should have. Young, pregnant. She'd witnessed something she shouldn't have. Yoon ordered me to handle it. It just meant someone else had to do the work. That was humanity. That has to count for something. Creating instead of destroying. That's everything. And anyone who can make that choice still has something worth saving. And I don't want to lose it. This man, who'd killed 47 people, who'd fought his way out of an underground bunker, who'd declared war on the most powerful criminal in Asia, he was asking permission to kiss her. "Come here," she said. She guided his face to hers, her fingers tracing the lines of his features, learning him the way she'd learned everything else. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, a scar near his temple that she'd traced 100 times in the dark. "Close your eyes," she whispered. "They're already closed. I feel like something's breaking inside me." The call was from Min-ho, Do-Yun's second-in-command, the only person from Yoon's organization who'd chosen to defect with him. "We have a problem," Min-ho said. "Yoon's made a move. He's offering to pay off the old man's debts in exchange for cooperation, and apparently, the father is considering it. The father is supposed to call, tell her there's a family emergency, get her to come home. Classic honey trap." "What is it?" Her voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath. "What's happening?" Expected her to crumble the way anyone would when faced with the ultimate betrayal. Instead, Oluchi Amadi laughed. "Of course he is." She shook her head. "That man has never missed an opportunity to disappoint me. Why should this be any different? Let him try. You've got a war to finish, and I've got a father to finally tell off. She recognized some of them by sound now. Minho with his clipped consonants, Park Jung-soo with his smoker's rasp, the woman called Viper whose voice was silk over steel. The attack happens tomorrow night. Dohyun's voice, commanding, certain. The voice of a leader. Yoon will be at his compound in Gangnam. We hit him fast, hit him hard, and we don't stop until he's dead. He's got 50 men at that compound. In a firefight, she'll be— Of course I did. I know you could leave. Could take money and disappear and build a life somewhere safe. And part of me wishes you would. Hard, desperate, trying to pour everything she felt into the press of her lips against his. Then let's survive this, she said against his mouth. Together. Oluchi? For a long moment, her father was silent. She could imagine him in the small house in Lagos, surrounded by the bills he couldn't pay, calculating whether his blind daughter was worth more to him as a bargaining chip or a permanent absence. There's a man here, he said finally. He's offered me a lot of money, enough to clear all my debts, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. He says it's for your own good, that the man you married is going to get you killed. You don't get to sell me out and call it protection. And if you help these men, if you sell out your own daughter, I will make sure everyone in Lagos knows what kind of man you really are. His voice was different now, smaller. When your mother died, I was so angry. I needed someone to blame. You were there, and you couldn't even see me hating you. Tell them you won't help. And then maybe we can start over. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known, he murmured into her hair. I learned from the best. She looked up at him, toward him at least, her eyes finding where his should be. Now let's finish this. And at the center of it all, Shin Dohyun, the weapon-turned warrior, fighting for something he'd never believed he'd have. Lucci stayed in the command vehicle, a retrofitted van parked 3 blocks from the compound. Minho was with her, along with 2 other guards, not because she needed protection, but because Dohyun had been adamant. If something happens to me, he'd said before leaving, Minho will get you out. New identity, new country, enough money to start over. East Wing is clear, Dohyun's voice clipped and professional. West Wing secured. Park Jung-soo. Yoon's falling back to the main building. Minho beside her, relaying information. He's got maybe 15 men left. This is almost over. Between him and the end of this nightmare, between him and the life he wanted to build with Lucci. The main building loomed ahead, a brutalist concrete structure that had been Yoon's headquarters for 30 years. Somewhere inside, the old man was waiting, probably surrounded by his last remaining guards, probably already planning his escape. Boss, Minho's voice crackled through his earpiece. We've got a problem. She's at the compound. She only came back because he threatened her mother. Where is my father? You're her. Ji-young's voice was sharp with recognition. The blind girl. My father's been obsessed with you for weeks. That's why I'm here. Footsteps. Ji-young moving closer. I have information about my father's contingency plans. He's got a bomb in the main building. If he thinks he's going to lose, he'll blow the whole thing. Take everyone with him. My father, his chief of security, and me. Someone has to get there before he triggers it. Do you really think he'd want me to sit here and let that happen? The boss is going to kill me. Left turn here, 3 steps up, door at the end. It smelled like expensive leather and old cigarettes, the scent of power and control. She moved carefully, her hands sweeping the space, learning the geography. Desk, chair, bookshelf. And there, a panel on the wall, just where Ji-young had said. I'm at the panel, she called. What do I do? Smooth buttons, arranged in a standard configuration. She pressed each number carefully, listening for the confirmation beep. Nothing happened. Ji-young, the code isn't working. You thought I didn't know about the turncoats? Yoon laughed. I've known from the beginning. They've been feeding your husband exactly the information I wanted him to have. This was always a one-way door. But by then you'll already be dead. The gun pressed against her forehead. Cold metal, absolute finality. Any last words? Actually, I do have last words. The moment she'd started singing, he'd known. Known where she was, known she was in danger, known he had to get there before it was too late. He'd abandoned the assault, abandoned the plan, abandoned everything except the single desperate need to reach her. Now he stood in the doorway of Yoon's office, gun raised, facing the man who'd built him into a monster. Dohyun. Yoon's voice was almost fond. My greatest creation. Come to save your blind bride? She's the one who broke you. The one who made you weak. Yoon's gun stayed pressed to Luchi's forehead. Before her, you were perfect, efficient, loyal, and now look at you, throwing away everything I built for a woman who can't even see your face. Even if you kill me, you can't stop it. Release her and I'll make your death quick. Knew the micro-expressions that preceded violence. Knew, with absolute certainty, when death was about to arrive. He threw himself between Luchi and the bullet. The impact spun him around. A blossom of fire in his chest, his shoulder, his arm. Multiple shots, he realized. Yoon had been aiming for both of them, but Luchi was behind him. Luchi was safe. He fired back. One shot. Center mass. Perfect. Despite the pain. Always perfect. Chairman Yoon fell. The man who'd ruled Seoul's underworld for 40 years. The monster who'd turned a 6-year-old into a weapon. The architect of 1,000 deaths. Gone. Dohyun? Luchi's voice, shaking. Dohyun, are you… You're… With bullets in his chest and 2 minutes until the building exploded, Shin Dohyun sang a lullaby in Igbo. His voice was weak, broken, barely a whisper, but it was there, and she sang with him, her voice rising where his fell, carrying the melody while she pressed her hands to his wounds. Sleep, little one. The stars are watching. Sleep, little one. You are not alone. Singing in a pool of blood, surrounded by the dead, with 90 seconds until detonation. He didn't ask questions. He just grabbed them both, Dohyun over his shoulder, Luchi by the hand, and ran. They made it out with 30 seconds to spare. The explosion lit up the night sky behind them, Chairman Yoon's empire collapsing in fire and ash. Luchi didn't see it, but she felt the heat on her back, heard the roar of destruction. And in Minho's arms, bleeding and broken and barely alive, Dohyun was still singing, still fighting, still, impossibly, surviving. The hospital was chaos. Doctors, nurses, the kind of organized pandemonium that Luchi had trained for but never experienced from the other side. She sat in the waiting room, covered in Dohyun's blood, refusing to move until someone told her he was alive. He's in surgery, Minho's voice, exhausted but steady. 3 bullets, 1 collapsed lung, but the doctors say he's strong. They think he'll make it. Thanks to you. When the doctor finally came out, she was on her feet before he could speak. He's stable, the doctor said. Critical, but stable. The next 24 hours are crucial, but he's fighting. Whatever he has to live for, it's keeping him alive. Luchi found her way to his bedside by sound. The monitors, the oxygen, the soft rhythm of his breathing. She pulled a chair close and took his hand. You idiot, she whispered. You absolute idiot. Jumping in front of bullets. Who does that? You're not supposed to throw yourself in front of guns for a blind girl from Lagos. She pressed her forehead to his hand and cried, for everything they'd been through, everything they'd lost, everything they still had left to lose. And then, impossibly, she felt his fingers tighten around hers. Luchi. His voice was barely a whisper, cracked and broken. Stop crying. You'll ruin my reputation. The Reaper, taken down by a blind nurse with a lullaby, and in a hospital room, surrounded by machines and monitors in the aftermath of war, 2 broken people held hands and started to believe in the future. 3 months later, the hospital in Gangnam was the best in Korea, a gleaming tower of glass and steel where the wealthy came to receive care that most people could only dream of. Luchi had spent more time here than she'd ever expected. First waiting for Dohyun to recover from his wounds, and now waiting for something else entirely. Mrs. Shin? Your optic nerve showed more function than expected. With time and therapy, you should recover approximately 60% of your vision. But the important thing is, you will see again. I've been told my face is rather intimidating. We'll dim the room and let you adjust gradually. Take your time, Dr. Park said. Your brain needs to relearn how to process visual information. Couldn't respond. Tears were streaming down his face. The face she was seeing for the first time. The face she'd traced with her fingers in the darkness. The face of the man who'd thrown himself in front of bullets to save her. "You're crying," she said, reaching out to touch the tears. "I've felt you cry before, but I've never seen it. Watching you see me for the first time? You're just saying that. Your scar makes you look like a warrior." "It's the least I can do," Ji-young had said. "You brought down my father. You freed me. And you showed me that even weapons can become human." "I feel ridiculous," he muttered as they waited for the ceremony to begin. "You look beautiful." Ji-young, who'd found freedom and purpose in rebuilding her family's legitimate businesses. Park Jung-soo and the others from the alliance, who'd risked everything to bring down a tyrant. And in the front row, eyes still red from a long flight, sat Oluchi's father. He'd come. After everything. After the betrayal, the forgiveness, the months of tentative phone calls and halting apologies, he'd come. He looked older than she remembered, smaller, like the weight of his guilt had physically diminished him. But he was here, and when their eyes met, when he saw her looking back at him, really looking, for the first time in 24 years, he began to cry. "I'm sorry," he mouthed across the room. "I'm so sorry." They bowed to their ancestors and to each other. And when the officiant pronounced them married, really married, not the desperate bargain they'd struck in a government office, Dohyun pulled her into a kiss that made the guests cheer. "Nkem," she whispered against his lips. "My own," the Igbo word for possession, for belonging, for the kind of love that claims without destroying. "Nkem," he repeated, his pronunciation imperfect but improving. "I practiced. I've been listening." The sign above the door read New Dawn Academy, in both Korean and English. "Another full class this month," Minho reported, scrolling through applications on his tablet. 37 kids, all former gang members or street children, all looking for a second chance. He'd designed the curriculum himself, not to create weapons as Yoon had done, but to give these kids the discipline and skills they needed to build real lives. And the job placement numbers? "They want you to testify against the remaining members of Yoon's organization." It was a price he'd eventually pay, but not yet, not today. "Boss?" A young voice from the doorway. "Mrs. Shin is here to see you." She was glowing, a radiance that went beyond health or happiness. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, crossing to Do-hyun's desk, "but I have news." "I wanted to be sure before I told you." He couldn't even say the word. "A baby." She finished for him. "We're having a baby. I should have said it before, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you and our child know it." And in that crib, wrapped in a blanket that mixed Korean and Nigerian patterns, slept the most beautiful baby either of them had ever seen. "She has your eyes," Do-hyun whispered, standing at the crib's edge in the soft light of dawn. "And your stubbornness." Luchi leaned against him, exhausted and happy in equal measure. "She refused to sleep until I sang the lullaby 3 times. It's a good song. You just needed someone to help you find it. How to fight and when not to." "She's going to change the world," Luchi said. "She already has." Do-hyun pressed a kiss to Ada's forehead, then to Luchi's. "You both have." "Starting over at your age? That's more than I've ever done before." So that's the story, besties, of how a blind girl bandaged a gunshot wound and accidentally captured the heart of Korea's most dangerous man, of how a weapon learned to love, of how 2 broken people found wholeness in each other. If this story made you cry, made you smile, made you believe in impossible love stories, drop a comment and let me know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another Afro-Korean romance. Until next time, take care of each other, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is also the one who needs love the most. Love you all. See you in the next one.